Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA USA. IPA USA is a USA affiliate of the International Play Association. As part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, and these are conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find all of the Porch Play Chats by going to ipausa.org. In that top right-hand corner, you can be a friend on Facebook, you can be a subscriber on YouTube, and you can follow us on Instagram. And every Monday, just like magic, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. With me on the porch is Lisa Murphy, my co-facilitator.
Hello, good morning.
And joining us today is Heather Bernt Santy. Heather has
my favorite nerd.
I know. Yes, my favorite nerd too.
Oh boy.
Actually,
I thought I was your favorite nerd.
Okay, well, yes.
We can be your co-favorite nerd.
Okay,
Mom loves us equally, Lisa.
Okay, got it. For over 30 years, Heather has been living her commitment to children, their families, and their teachers. You may know Heather from her work as the host of the popular early care and education podcast, The Early Childhood Nerd. But she also loves her work as a speaker, consultant, writer, and professor. She's held just about every position possible. That's where you and I and Lisa all share.
Yep.
You name it, she's probably tried it. Heather is an enthusiastic believer in the child's right to play and in the research that tells us that play is right. So her podcast, one more time, that earlychildhoodnerd.com. So make sure you look that up. Today, Heather's going to talk to us about reframing misbehavior using schema play theory. Okay.
Which should be mandatory for anybody before they do this work, and especially before they set foot in a toddler room.
Yes.
Schema play theory.
Yes.
Yes, 100%.
Where are you in this book development? Just
not as far as you'd think for as much as I've been talking about it. But I'm making picking up some momentum right now. So I've got I've got a chapter done finally.
Yay! Congratulations.
Yeah. So, but I just, like, the other day I texted Carol Garboden Murray and Mike Huber, and I was like, what do you do when you start to hate the topic you said you'd write the book about?
Yes, they just say keep writing.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said. But yeah, I'm making more progress on it now than I'm
gonna be
it's like having a baby.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the very first person to buy that book. So
yeah.
And one more thing I have to just share really fast about Mike Huber's last book on Inclusion Includes Us. We have been able to get Inclusion Includes Us digitally for every one of our students.
Really?
Yeah, I'm using it as a text in my exceptional child class. And
yes,
that's the one that's going to be used in, and I am thrilled.
Yeah. And for anybody who's watching this, who is brand new to the Porch Play Chat series, and what we're doing, Mike Huber has been a guest many times, as has Heather, and his focus is, amongst many things, is working with children with disabilities and various abilities, and that's who we're talking about. And his book is Inclusion Includes Us.
Yes, and it's an amazing book. So, because I'm writing this new accessibility for every child course for my school, and I have been reading his book, and every time I go, oh my God, I've got to write this down. Mike Huber says
let's just record a commercial for Mike's book,
right? I mean, hold on, I'm gonna circle it back to Heather, but
because we're waiting.
I'm gonna say that when it comes to schema, play theory, and inclusion, you guys pop into my head. You two have very much, and I'm not just saying this because you know me, I wouldn't just blow smoke up your butt. It's, I think, like I did not know about that until you were talking about it, the schema. And I've now plopped that into the infant toddler workshop, it's applicable to everything, but
Right.
especially because they're like, oh my God, all he does is dump fill.
Yes.
And you're like, and here's why. And then all of a sudden they're like, what? And,
Yeah.
and I think anytime you're able to, I don't know,
It's like we do with
put a
families, right?
tool,
Yes.
tool in their tool belt
Yeah.
to where
Yes.
they're just thinking, I don't know, it's like they're just on this track, and
Yeah.
then you give them something and they're able to just go, oh,
Right in
oh.
the lens.
And I think you definitely, amongst other topics, but definitely with the schema play, and then also with Mike, with inclusion and you know, what do you do when that kid in a wheelchair shows up at that adventure playground? And
Yeah.
it's like stuff you didn't even stop to think about. And that's why I love that you give voice to this particular topic.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
Mike and I
so-
submitted a proposal to do our first workshop together in the fall, so I hope that gets.
That'll
hope that
be
gets
awesome.
accepted. Hope
That
so.
would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so on to the
Anyway.
topic, because I'm very interested. I have a whole new page.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I for one thing, I hate the word misbehavior and I wish we could stop using it. I always have to do air quotes whenever I talk about behavior or misbehavior. For like one episode of the podcast, I had one of the dog training clickers. And I was going to do that for air quotes, and then I got feedback that people's dogs were responding, so I had to not use that anymore. But anyway, so I'm as often as I can, I want to talk about just reframing. Like, just let's think about this, because what we do is we other it, right? Behaviors over here as this big other thing that stands in the way of the teaching that we want to do. And therefore, the kids who are challenging us become othered, and we hear phrases like, well, it's distracting for the children who want to learn. And that kind
Eye
of
roll.
yes, yeah, at least an eye roll, maybe a vomit. So anyway, I just am always trying to find a way that, you know, you just don't know what's going to click for the person you're talking to or training, teaching. But one thing that I have noticed, and as I study schema and or the schema play, and I'm thinking about those schemas, is that a lot of it can provide that different lens for seeing. So you know, again, so just I guess if this is someone's first time hearing about schema play, I'll do it really quick. Chris Athey in the mid-70s did a study called the Froebel Early Learning Project. I never know if I'm saying his name right. Probably not, since he's German.
I think that was
Froebel.
fine. Yeah.
Froebel. Anyway, their goal for this I think it was a 5-year project, was to observe children at play and try to figure out kind of how they show you what they're thinking as they're playing. And they discovered there were all these repeated patterns in children's play, over 40, I think, that they ultimately identified. Most often when it's talked about, which in the United States is not very often, it's 8 or 10, the 8 or 10. So children connecting and disconnecting, enveloping and enclosing, figuring out orientation and perspective, rotation and circularity. There's 3 more. Trajectory, transporting, and transforming. So and there's lots of places they can go hear me talking more about each of those things, and I joined Lisa and Jeff's podcast
And read your master's thesis. I think it's up there in the interweb somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. So anyway, what we see in those explorations, those repetitive play explorations, is stuff like, sometimes they throw, sometimes they knock down block towers, sometimes they're climbing where we don't want them to climb, or they're tipping their chair back and we don't want them to do that anymore, jumping where we don't want them to jump, they're fighting to be the line leader and we don't understand why it's so important. And each of those things can kind of be connected to a play schema and give us mostly, I think, give us a thing to be curious about when we're trying to figure out a behavior that's challenging for us, or to us. when we pause and say, okay, why is this happening? What does this child need? What is this behavior, quote unquote, communicating? What are they trying to communicate? What need is it that's behind this? And so framing it as part of a schema play exploration, I think, can be really useful.
And that they're not out to get you.
Right. And it's not just random weird behavior. It's not just, I don't get why this kid keeps doing it. It's there's a framework for you to help you get why they're doing it. If we think about like knocking down a block tower, that could be part of a connecting or disconnecting exploration. Every time a child acts on their environment or with materials in their environment, they're getting data input, right? That's helping build those brain connections that are so important in these early years. And so when they're building with blocks, we're very happy to acknowledge this is math, this is science, this is geometry, this is there's
engineering.
There's some social aspects to block play and identity formation as they get to try their own idea and have some success with that, and where yay, blocks are wonderful. But then what do we do about the kids who just want to knock them down? Well, that's a whole different set of data they're getting about blocks and about physical properties and about the world and about what happens emotionally and socially when I knock somebody else's block tower down. And so it's that, that's an example of how, instead of seeing that kid as destructive or selfish or mean or clumsy, all those words that come out when we're talking about the knocking down parts of block play, can instead be framed as this is something that they're getting input from. And maybe that helps us provide for a place or a space or just our own rule and expectation for making it okay to knock things down, as okay as it is to build them.
I wrote down, Heather, while you were talking, that the framework allows us to move beyond either liking or not liking the behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
It allows us, I think, to just move beyond that emotional reaction, and it provides an opportunity for us to be reflective on it. And the piece that you said very quickly, but it's something I love, is that curiosity. How and that's a whole other conversation, but how do we make sure that the people who are working with children in the first place have that place or have that in, like, I want curiosity to be your default setting,
right?
As opposed to thinking like this 2-year-old is just out to make me crazy. Like,
right.
but what's going on here is different than what's going on here. And it might sound very subtle, but it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the piece that I really, it's not that the child is being challenging.
No, you're being challenged.
You're being challenged by the child
because of your own expectations.
In your own lens. So again, it's going back to widening your lens of what are the possibilities of why this is happening, instead of this child is destructive and mean and disrespectful and doesn't take care of materials, which could be messages that were told to us, right?
Sure.
So it's in our little
your
mind,
script,
and it's replaying when the child is doing something similar. And so, so much of working with children is really being in tune with our own reactions instead of reacting to the child, figuring out why we're reacting that way. And I think you're giving us tools to do that.
Yeah. Well, so while you were talking, when we're talking about like those scripts we have, right? Like, I'm a teacher, and so my teacher script is use materials appropriately, respect our materials. I think this is also where the dumping and the filling and the carrying elements that Lisa talked about with toddlers come in. That could be part of a transporting exploration. That could be part of an enclosing and enveloping exploration. So instead of, we're so I think, already culturally inclined, but also trained in our teacher prep stuff to stop behavior, to look at, again, misbehavior as something that our job is to stop and control. And that's how we are teachers, so we can get to that real stuff. Instead of thinking in terms of, and if you're not comfortable with play, then think about exploration. Because that's
What do we need to call it? What do we need to
right?
call it?
Whatever it works for you,
So
just know.
we
Yeah.
need to shift from thinking about stopping the behavior to thinking about what in this behavior can we support. What,
Mhm.
if there maybe people are getting hurt when the blocks are dumped, or the chair falls over backwards when they tip it back and they're doing an orientation and perspective exploration, or they're pushing other kids out of the way to get to the front of the line because they've got a positioning and ordering exploration that they're doing.
Mhm.
Thinking about, okay, those specific things, maybe we don't want people getting pushed, or we don't want blocks falling on people's head. That's fine. I'm not suggesting free for all. I'm suggesting understanding and curiosity. So how can we figure out how to meet a positioning and ordering exploration need that we see, instead of just stopping the child from always wanting to be in the front of the
Right.
line?
How can we can use
felt
that
like
as,
it got away from me.
well, no, I
No.
don't think so.
No.
How can we use that observation and say, it's like a theme in a book, right? They
Yeah.
only like this book. They only like this book. Okay, so what's the theme in that book, and how can we have opportunities for the child to be exploring and futzing with that theme elsewhere? It's to me, it's 100% the same thing. I think the adult not intuition, maybe their disposition.
Mhm.
There's just, and I don't want to sound like I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but, I just think that there's some people who are so, and I'm going to steal something from you, Heather. They're
Okay.
so wearing their teacher hat
Oh yeah.
that your misbehavior is getting in the way of me doing what I'm here to do, instead of seeing that this is what the child is needing. It's not a speed bump towards you putting on that teacher hat.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder if we looked at it as the question is being curious about what is this child developing, right?
Sure.
Instead
But
of,
that still implies that the teacher cares.
well, I think they do care. I just think they're overwhelmed with.
Sometimes.
I didn't
everything
mean not caring. I meant caring about the exploration that
Yeah.
perhaps schema behavior that the child was engaged in at that point.
Yeah,
If
but
that
because they
curiosity
don't-
piece.
Yeah, because they don't know about the schemas, right?
Yeah.
And so if they're seeing it as
Getting in the way.
mistaken behavior, challenging behavior, whatever we want to call it, instead of saying to themselves, oh, what are they developing?
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're developing this schema or that schema, or this is what they're doing. And so it all goes back to development.
Yeah.
So if we could frame it in a way so that they're curious about not only what this child is trying to communicate to us, but what is this child developing, then they can articulate that to other people so that they don't see it as destructive behavior or misbehavior, right?
I think when I talk to people about being curious, either about what's happening in children's brains while they play, or their bodies, or their social skills, thinking about their development while they play, or pausing to think what this behavior might be communicating, can feel really overwhelming, because it could be millions of things, right? So, and I'm not saying that schema play is the answer to every behavior that challenges you, but it is a really, for me, I think, accessible place to start. Like there's 8 or 10 things that we could start building our skill at wondering and supporting, rather than feeling like, well, I don't know every possible thing a child could be communicating or needing or exploring here, so I don't know where to start.
But in the context of schema play, they would have a source, right?
Correct.
If they
A starting spot.
understood it. a starting spot. Whenever students are like, so-and-so is doing blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what are they trying to tell you?
Mhm.
Right? That's my very first
So let me
question.
jump on that. So, you've both heard me say this before, is that every behavior is an attempt at a connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how does that lens shift allow me to not be so reactive to some of those quote unquote misbehaviors?
Mhm.
What are they trying to tell me? What are they
Yeah.
trying to say?
Yeah.
And I always say every behavior is a form of communication. So we're saying the same thing. But I always try to get them to see it through the child's eyes, not through their eyes at the
Mhm.
moment. But schema play and understanding schema would give them just a tool in the toolbox. I think they should have all of those
Right.
in the cupboard or in front of the cupboard, not behind the door,
Yeah.
where they can reframe,
Yeah.
looking at that going, oh, and then how can I make this more safe? How can I keep children from being upset? Though I think sometimes children need to be upset, because then they
Absolutely.
learn how to
They do.
resolve being upset, right? With so how can I, as a teacher, do I provide a dump and fill space in the classroom so that they're not dumping every manipulative off the shelf, right? Can I say, oh, you want to dump and fill? Let's go over here. This is where we can dump and fill, though I hate to.
What part of this can I say yes to?
Right.
That's one of
Yeah.
my favorite statements.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it can be useful too when we're thinking about redirecting behavior. Honestly, a lot of times when I hear people talk about redirecting, it feels like a cop-out, like they're not putting a lot of thought into it. But I was told,
well, also
that I need
redirecting
to
doesn't mean,
redirect, so I'm going to try.
yeah, but I think redirection often gets incorrectly interpreted as you go over there and do that. That's not redirecting.
Yes.
Like
Right.
just shooing them away is not redirecting, but that's often the practice I end up seeing. Like somebody
Right.
told me I should redirect them, but I'm not actually assisting them in engaging in something else, right? A substitute or another new exploration.
Or giving thought to, does the redirection meet the same drive? Like,
Correct.
when I was doing
Good
last
point,
fall,
good
I did
point.
a bunch of interviews with childcare providers and teachers. Why did I just separate them like it's a dichotomy? Childcare folks, college instructors and parents, families, about schema stuff. And one of them shared a story about, they had like a glass door, and the child was pushing like kind of a heavy wheeled toy into the door and kind of watching it bounce back, and then he'd pull it back a little further and try it again,
Right again.
a little further and try it again. And obviously we don't want children throwing heavy things towards glass doors, even though the door had probably been built to with that kind of thing in mind. But the redirection that they saw attempted was just to take him over to the climber, thinking, oh, you want big body play, let's go climb. But if that child was experimenting with rotation or circularity, the climber is not going to meet that same drive and not going to grab him like that. Or if it was about trajectory, I have to push a little harder the further I get back, the closer I am, the shorter the bounce back is, whatever data he was getting from that, he's not going to get that same kind of stuff from going to the climber. So thinking about, okay, you're clearly, at least it looks to me like you're figuring out some trajectory stuff. Where is it okay to roll this thing? Should we take it outside? Can we put something against the glass that,
Well, thank you for that. I wrote that down. That is going to be my new nerd quote. Does your redirection match the energy?
Yeah.
And that's brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
My work here is done.
She closes her laptop.
Yeah. Not you have a few more minutes. You're not quite done yet.
Okay. All right. Lisa, you said at the very beginning that you thought schema play should be required information or training for anyone working with toddlers. And Deb, you said it's appropriate for all groups and helpful for all groups. But I do really agree that so much of what's confusing about working with toddlers and frustrating about working with toddlers could be reframed with a lens of a schema play exploration, instead of just seeing it as something that drives you crazy that you feel like you need to stop.
Okay, the first time I ever heard you talk about that, I was like, oh, this needs to go in the infant toddler workshop.
Oh yeah,
like yesterday.
mm-hmm.
And even just plopping, and I don't like get into it. I just say there's a framework that exists that if you're working with this age group, you need to familiarize yourself with, because it's going to give you some understanding as to why they're doing some of those behaviors that you're like, oh my God, they're making me crazy. And I just, you see that like kind of invisible weight get lifted off of somebody that, okay, so there's a reason why this might be happening. Yes. And
They
and I
don't
think
wake up in the morning to drive me crazy
they
today?
don't,
Okay.
they
Oh,
don't,
really?
but I think it allows the ego to start then getting out of the way. I think it allows, and Deb, you alluded to it, is your own stuff that maybe you've not really investigated. Instead of seeing that like that, excuse me, but that oh, sorry, keep talking.
Like
Maybe.
I think like so much when we're talking about reframing anything, whether it's planning activities or thinking about your daily schedule or behavior stuff, it has to start with the teacher the adult doing some reflection and analysis of why they currently have the lens that they have, or the framework that they have. Exactly. And you've people have probably heard me talk a lot about teacher ego, and I don't mean that in an insulting name calling way. I just mean when you have this identity as a teacher, you've got a framework for that, and often it's adult led. It's only successful if it's completely under control and no one ever steps out of line. And so that's, I think, a big piece of why it's hard to make that shift, or why it takes a lot of practice to make that shift. And so having these little more accessible bits and pieces of framework to plug in can be a pretty low risk way to try and stretch your teacher ego and your teacher identity.
I think one of the, I mean, I see an article, what is a good teacher? The definition of a good teacher, because I think people are so in this, controlling directive because they have a responsibility to teach.
Yeah,
whatever that means,
instead of a responsibility to facilitate.
Right. Yeah. Well, and
create opportunities.
Yeah. In the last Porch Play Chat that I did, Deb,
I was going to say, I was going to bring this up. Right? I was going
to, and teacher prep and practitioner attitude are two of the big barriers to sort of adopting a play pedagogy. And part of it is that we have these memories of our own of what teaching looks like and what school looks like. And we try to make that fit into a much younger age group than our memories are probably coming from. And there's so much cultural pressure to move away from play that, again, sometimes we just need these little bits, the schema play theory. Whenever I do a workshop or webinar on that, I see more faces going, than any other topic that I do. And I think part of it is because it's so, they immediately have examples that come to mind when they hear about this, and it feels manageable. Like I could go in tomorrow and plug in a little bit of curiosity using schema play exploration lens.
I like how you said that's not threatening.
It's not threatening. And we know why we're in this situation, right? There's lots of reasons why we've gotten here, where teachers really feel like to be valued, and to be respected. This is what you need to be doing.
Right.
And so our message is, we want you to reflect on how that's working for you, right? How many things during your day could be changed if you become more curious and more, instead of more directed. So
think of the stress relief
Oh
of
my
being able to
goodness.
see this not as behavior that I haven't figured out how to control, and more as an exploration that I can actively support or facilitate.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, what a relief.
Yeah.
Because I do think sometimes teachers walk out of the child development program and they go, oh my God, that was a horrible day. So I want you to stop there and reflect on what made it horrible.
Yeah.
and then reflect on, why did that happen, right? And
well, that's going to
how-
springboard into Carol Garbode Murray's work,
Yeah.
which is, I didn't feel like I was a teacher today because I forgot that the main part of my job is the caring connection piece.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that
cool.
that whole piece, maybe that's the next Porch Play Chat, Heather. That whole piece
Okay.
is reflecting, you and I, when we go into a classroom of college students, we go, oh my God, that was an amazing class. Or we go, oh, I sucked.
Yeah.
we're and on the way home, I'm reflecting what made it suck, right? What was it that
What was
I
that?
didn't do that I could have done
Yeah.
and I change it, right? So I think as an educator, regardless what age you work with, you have to have that reflective piece. What could I have done differently? How can I change the question? How can I change the activity? How can I change the script that's in my head that I use in order to engage more, in order to make it more active, in order to make it, here's the theory, here, now you're going to.
But that even, again, that requires the adult to see that I play a piece
Right.
in the mechanism, right? That it's not that the kids weren't paying attention or that they weren't blah, 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 but realizing that I have a role in that dynamic.
Yeah.
And the flip side, teachers, again, they'll hear that and they'll think, well, that sounds like I'm just extending my sucky day by ruminating on how sucky it was. So it's important to never mind. But it's important to think, what went well today?
Yeah.
How did I contribute to that thing that went well? And what
how
can I do more of that? And it's a meet in the middle, but I'm the number one post-gig, post-class ruminator.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. And well, it's so funny. And when things go really well, I'll say, let's write that down. Don't forget that, right? And I write it all down. And fortunately, with that reflection, I'm able to avoid those sucky days. Right? When I thought I needed to teach something instead of facilitate a conversation around something, right? And that's the huge difference in college classrooms, as far as I'm concerned, and high school classrooms and middle school classrooms and elementary school classrooms, right? Is that you need to be the facilitator, not the directive person.
I just did one a while ago where I spent 2 hours talking about reframing our ideas of behavior and the way we talk about it, and seeing it as part of the teaching and not something to be stopped so that we can teach. And went through the whole 2 hours and got like one of the very last questions that came in was like, so when is it okay to use consequences? So close. We were so
close. You were so close. Right. So,
it's hard. It's hard because it's been years and years of experiencing this as a culture and as teachers. And suddenly, we talk for an hour with someone and we think they're going to be able to unhook all of those.
Right,
no,
exactly.
Those habits.
And you have to layer it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and you have to hear them.
Yeah.
Here's what, sometimes I'll say, write down what you're most struggling with, and they'll put them on a piece of paper and throw them in a hat. And in between times, I'll pull some out and say, anyone else struggling with this?
Yeah.
And people will raise their hand and I'll say, okay, let's talk about that, right?
Mhm.
Because it has to be meaningful,
Yeah.
just like it needs to be meaningful to
children,
children. But I think this conversation of using schema and the understanding of those stages of schema,
Mm.
do we call them stages? Is that how
I was going to actually jump in there.
Yeah.
Americans like stages because
Right.
then we
We
know
like-
we're doing it
we
right.
like linear theory.
it's a linear theory. Thank you.
And it's everything all at once, whatever that movie that just won all the awards is.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know.
Everything everywhere all at once.
Did you see the
Schema
movie?
play could be happening. No.
Not yet.
Oh,
I
it's
can't wait to go.
fantastic. I saw it on the
That's
airplane a
definitely
couple
fun.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
I've
I'm
been told I
actually
need
going to go
this.
see.
Very
I never watch Academy Award things because they always make me cry, but I thought probably need to go see that one.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when we think about this continuum, right, then I think that gives teachers a different lens
Mhm.
to look at what children are doing.
Right.
I'd call it a
Instead of-
buffet, not a continuum.
Yeah,
There you
I would know. I was trying to
It's a
figure out what's a
buffet. Oh,
better
I
way
like
to
that.
say it. Because it
Yeah.
could be
Buffet.
one child like the Freddie and George, who I talk about a lot, who clearly have one schema that they're investigating everywhere. Or
Mhm.
it could just be you're looking at your whole group and you see a little transporting exploration over there and you see a little trajectory exploration over
Oh, I
there.
like the buffet.
But I
But
think
buffet's
that's a
good.
very American mindset. And I get asked that a lot too. It's
It's
like,
Piaget's
okay,
fault.
of course it is.
It's Piaget what?
It's
his
Piaget's
fault.
fault
Oh, yeah, because
That we think
that we have to have this
And
progression.
what
Yeah.
age is that over? And what
Yeah.
age does that
yeah, oh,
start?
yeah. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
forget those boundaries.
Yeah. It's a buffet. I like buffet.
Mhm.
I like the buffet. That's a
good. I'm
great way
going
to
to steal it,
describe
Lisa.
Steal it.
Heather, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. I always really, truly, here's my page of notes. I don't know if you can see it.
We
No,
can
it's
see
blending
it.
in with your Zoom.
Yeah,
back.
it's
It's like
blending
my
in with
ears.
the
My ears are
fake
gone
background.
today.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking like
My
dead
ears
today.
are always gone because of the background. So hang tight while I close this out.
Okay.
To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.